All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. In this video, we're going to talk about Devin Haney, Gary Russell Jr., and what Jojo Diaz had to say after the fight that took place last night between Haney and Jojo Diaz. Let's do that in this video. Welcome back to the channel. Very good fight last night from Devin Haney. He beats Jojo Diaz in a 12-round unanimous decision. Pretty much won, I guess, maybe 9. I would suspect 9 out of 12 rounds is probably what I would give him. I didn't keep a score I didn't really keep a scorecard in the fight because pretty much from the very beginning, I was like, okay, this is going to be rinse and repeat for the majority of the fight. Devin Haney just came out immediately, was keeping Jojo Diaz at arm's reach, was able to connect on jabs to the body, was really hitting his gloves and hitting him on the arms a lot. So I was like, look, man, it really doesn't matter. No need to keep scorecards in this because this is pretty much going to go like this, at least to the 7th or 8th round, and maybe we'll get to see some type of exchange between the two in the second half of the fight. That's pretty much what wound up taking place. Devin Haney at a point in time stopped moving as much. Jojo Diaz was able to cut off the ring a little bit better and get Devin Haney to engage a little bit more. But even in the times that they were engaging, Devin Haney was getting the better of that. However, Devin Haney did get hit on, I think he might have got hurt like 2 times in that fight. Looked like he may have been hurt by a body shot. I'm not quite sure. I'd have to go back and look at the tape because he reacted as if he had gotten hurt, but it really might have just been that he was just dipping out of the way once he got hit. As soon as Devin Haney got hit, he was not allowing Jojo Diaz to hit him with the same punch again up until maybe the 10th round where Jojo Diaz was able to hit him with overhand lefts, maybe 2-3 times in a round. But after the fight, Jojo Diaz was asked by Fight Hype who the best fighter is that he's fought, who the toughest fight was for him. And obviously, what they were aiming at is getting the answer about whether or not Devin Haney was a tougher fight for Jojo Diaz than Gary Russell Jr. was. I don't think that I think that's pretty much the only other loss that Jojo Diaz had in his career was Gary Russell Jr. And what Jojo Diaz said was that Gary Russell Jr. was the tougher fight for him, was the better fighter. And he said what's the difference between Gary Russell Jr. and Devin Haney? And he said it's just a lot of things that Devin Haney still needs to learn. And he didn't really get into a lot about it, but I will tell you for certain that he had the bits of success that Jojo Diaz had against Devin Haney when he was able to corner Devin Haney the few times where he was able to exchange, hit him with big hooks, daze him a little bit. Those things did not happen with Gary Russell Jr. Gary Russell Jr. was pretty much on point and won. I think he won every round. There was definitely no point in time in the second half of the fight where they ever got into any real exchange where Jojo Diaz felt like he had an opportunity to stop Gary Russell Jr. And in the 12th round of the fight with Devin Haney, that really did. It did look like that Jojo Diaz had an opportunity. Now, he didn't look to me like he was going to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. He looked like he gassed a little bit, and plus, Devin Haney's defense was good enough where if Devin Haney wanted to get away from him or move away from him, he could have done so. But Devin Haney, to his credit, stayed there and really started taking the fight. Still took the fight to Jojo Diaz. Even despite the fact that he was a little bit buzzed, actually showed that he's a very, very tough dude. Now, when they asked Jojo Diaz what he thought that Devin Haney could do to get better, the main thing that he said was that he could improve his pop. And he felt like he really didn't feel the punches of Devin Haney and that Devin Haney really didn't have a lot of power. But he said more than likely the problem with Devin Haney is is that Devin Haney is still at 135 pounds, and that weight cut probably does steal a lot from him, where if he was at 140 pounds, he would be able to have, that he would be a stronger fighter, and he would be able to, probably do more damage and have actually more weight on his shots than he does at 135. And that makes sense if you look at, what has happened with other fighters. Specifically, the guy that comes to mind for me is Terrence Crawford. When Terrence Crawford was at 135 pounds, he was not a knockout artist. He was somebody that he beat Burns. Ricky Burns. He beat Ricky Burns by decision. He beat Ray Beltran by decision. I do believe that I do have to check on whether or not he knocked out Marius Breidis, but I think that he might have gone the distance with Marius Breidis too, even though that was at 140 pounds as well. But once he got to 140 pounds and he was not nearly as emaciated during the weigh-ins, he was actually able to start going on a knockout streak and getting guys out of there. And I think that you find that being the case with guys that, really have to lose a lot of weight in order to make a division, which is one of the reasons why I say, if I was on Errol Spence Jr.'s camp and I was trying to fight Terrence Crawford, I might say, hey, let's try to have that fight at 154 pounds, because that's the first weight class of Errol Spence. And, Errol Spence was knocking out people up until he got to the upper echelon. Now he's beating people up and it's going the distance. Very well could have to do with the weight cut that he's having, really preventing him from having the strength that he has when he's in the gym carry over into the fight. And that seems like maybe what the case is with Devin Haney, because they sound very, very confident about Devin Haney and Devin Haney's punching power and what he's doing in the gym. But then when he gets into the fight, the pop is pretty much not there. Now, it did look like he was landing some bigger shots, to the body and, some hard shots to the body. But to me, it looked like they were harder shots because he was actually able to load up on the shots, and they weren't, just, fight, punches where you kind of slip the shot in there. Like Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis really, in his fights, when he's hurting people, really doesn't have to load up nearly as much as Devin Haney seemed like he had to load up in order to really make a dent on Jojo Diaz. But as far as who was the better fighter, obviously that to me was a pretty obvious scenario to begin with. Gary Russell Jr. to me is one of the more underrated fighters in boxing. And, when people talk about Gary Russell Jr., they always say, who has he fought? Who has he fought? Who has he fought? Who has he fought? And they very rarely stop to give the man credit and say, well, he's not fought these other guys that were champions because of what Jojo Diaz said. The man is extremely, extremely good in the boxing ring, and more than likely the guys that he's not able to get in the ring don't want to fight him because they know full well that they may not win that fight. And however you go about it, they take the easier route to get belts and pass right up through his weight class into another weight class. And I can go on and on about, and I will tell you, Carl Frampton, Scott Quigg, Josh Warrington, Shakur Stevenson, Oscar Valdez. Matter of fact, the champions up there, Leo Santa Cruz, the champions at 130 pounds look like are basically a bunch of ex 126 pounders that didn't fight Gary Russell Jr. But anyway, respect to Devin Haney for his good win. Shout out to Gary Russell Jr. Definitely hope to see him in the ring again soon. And anyway, with that, by the way, Jojo Diaz did say that he believed that without a doubt, Devin Haney is going to beat George Kambosos, because all George Kambosos has is an overhand right, and he's never going to hit Devin Haney with that. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. Make sure you leave your comment in the comment section. Like the video if you listened all the way to the end. Subscribe to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated. And with that, I'm out. Peace.